In this video, we're going to go over network topologies. A topology is the layout of a network. So this is the way all the computers are connected to each other in order to transmit data. There are four main ways that networks are laid out, but some of these ways are no longer used due to modern advances in technology. The two most common ones are star and mesh networks, but we're also going to very briefly look at bus and ring networks as well, although these aren't used very much anymore. In a star network, all of the devices on the network are connected to the central server. So this doesn't mean that the server is literally in the centre, it could be on a different floor, but it does mean that every single device on the network connects directly to the server. So any computing devices, any printers, the router, all connect to the server. So if one computer wants to send a request to get onto the internet, it goes through the server. That's what we mean by central. In a mesh network, however, all of the devices are connected to each other. There is no central server. If a file is stored on one computer, then the computer you are on will send a request to that computer in order to open it. In a bus network, all devices are connected to a central line. This can cause data collisions. Data travels from one device through the central line down to another device. So any data that is transferring from one to another might end up colliding, and that can lead to problems. In a ring network, each device is connected to the next device in the network. The problem with ring devices, though, is that because data has to travel in one direction around the network, transmission speeds can be slow. Bus and ring networks aren't used very much anymore, and the most common type of network now is star or mesh. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. With a star network, the central server stores all of the files, data and programs. This means it's much faster to update software and install new software because you only have to do it once on the server. It's also really easy to add new devices because they just need plugging into the server. The biggest disadvantage of this type of network, though, is that if the server breaks or fails in some way, the entire network goes down. So there's a heavy reliance on the server working properly. Luckily, servers don't really fail that often, so it's unlikely to be a common problem. However, it is something to bear in mind. When it comes to mesh networks, it's the opposite. There is no server, so there isn't a reliance on that server always being up. If one of the devices on the network fails, it doesn't matter because data can just be transferred via another route. It can be quite complicated to add on other devices and do backups because everything needs plugging into everything else. Both of these networks are fairly expensive to set up because both of them require. If you were to set up a star or a mesh network and do it via wired technology, they can be expensive. The amount of wires you need to connect both Another thing to consider when setting up a network is the amount of expertise the person has. Server networks require someone with a little bit of expertise and knowledge to set them up and keep them running, whereas mesh networks don't need this. Another consideration is the cost. A lot of networks now are wireless. However, wired networks are faster and more secure, so a lot of businesses will still opt to have a wired network. Both star and mesh networks can get quite expensive because of the amount of wires needed in order to set them up.
Exam question, it says that an office has a local area network. The office has 4 employees who each have a laptop. The office also has 1 server and 1 networked printer. The office is set up as a star network with a switch at the centre, and all devices are connected to the network using cables. Draw the devices and connections in the office star network. All devices must be clearly labelled. Okay, so you can see from my outstanding paint drawing how this should look like, and you can see that I've clearly labelled all of the devices on the network to explain my choices, and I've also followed the description in the instructions to make sure that I've covered everything needed.